This video is going to reveal the truth, and I suspect that there are people and departments that don't want me to reveal the truth, but I'm going to do it anyway because you deserve to hear it, you deserve to have the truth. Whether you're in the UK or internationally, this will affect everybody, and those viewers of mine who have written to me with detailed information to trust me to share that information with you deserve to have that information shared, and so that is what I'm going to do. Many of my viewers work for very large companies, even governmental departments, one of whom works for the UK critical national infrastructure sector as an infrastructure security engineer, quote, providing solutions to security risks faced by businesses and engineering them into place. My viewer writes that they can wholeheartedly corroborate as to the risk that we certainly face by allowing the government and whoever will be bidding on for the tender to run any platform or app for digital ID. And just case in point, I'm going to prove to you that this is already underway. It's been underway for some time, and there are lots of companies who are already working in this sector on this sort of thing, and it's not going to be centralized to government. It's going to be in a way farmed out to third-party companies to manage the digital ID and so on. So while I do that, please do bop the subscribe button, like the video, share it, comment, things like that, because otherwise the video might get buried. And believe me, you want this information out there. So as promised, let me prove it to you. This is guidance available from the government of enabling the use of digital identities in the UK. They say we're working to help people securely prove who they are without having to present physical documents. Now, whilst there are clear benefits to digital ID, I've said before that I've seen it working in other countries, including China, but I think you'll all agree we are not China. And would I trust this government to implement it safely and securely? No, is the answer to that. And my viewers who are cybersecurity engineers and senior software engineers and so on would agree with that. Now, this document here says that this guidance of enabling the use of trusted digital ID to securely prove things about themselves, such as who they are, where they are, their age, without having to present physical documents. And this is all underpinned by the Data Use and Access Bill, which I've covered in previous videos and my concerns with that. They say a digital ID is a digital representation of your identity information, like your name and your age, at your request. It can also contain other information about you, such as your address, your biometric information, fingerprints, and even face scans. Now, it says on here that if you've used any of your documents or anything to unlock banking apps and things like that with face scans, you'll already be familiar with this sort of digital ID service in proving who you are. Many of my viewers have also written and said, well, as a migrant to the UK, they've already had to go through the process of proving who they are with one of these apps. And coincidentally, the app that they found on the phone, which now looks like a government ID app, they seem to think that they've been tricked into creating a digital ID when they didn't really want one. That is something I'm going to look into in a bit more detail. But we digress. That guidance document that I just mentioned refers to third-party companies who provide services for digital ID. And when you jump through a couple of hoops, this is the Register of Digital Identity and Attribute Service Companies. And there's a whole list of companies here. They're all third-party companies. And I've checked one or two of them, and some of them created in the last few years. But there's a whole list of these companies here, all providing digital ID or other kind of ID services, which will be underpinned and doubtless will feed into this digital ID if they roll it out by this government. The bit that I really want to talk to you about in this video is this section here, because this will tie into what one of my viewers has sent to me in full confidence to discuss with you, which includes the very risks and the truth behind all of this risk with digital ID. Because Keir Starmer leans very much on the example of Estonia. Well, I'm going to reveal to you just how dangerous this might be. And it stems a little bit from this, at least in part. So what is the trust framework? Because the government sets here standards for digital identities and attributes. It said it's important that digital IDs can be trusted to be reliable and accurate, just like physical documents. It's developed a set of rules called the UK Digital Identity and Attributes Trust Framework to help achieve it. What is the Trust Framework? It says, the Trust Framework is a set of government-backed rules which draws on existing guidance, standards and best practice for trustworthy and secure digital identity services. But that is where we come on to what we are really talking about with this framework and where these real risks will occur. Now, you'll forgive me for not sharing the screen at this point. I am going to read out the email, but I don't want any risk of anybody identifying who this is that's writing to me. But I will read out the key sections as follows. My viewer writes that they want to share a concise overview of the Estonian digital ID system, highlighting both the strengths and the vulnerabilities that could be exploited by determined threat actors. And that could be anybody, let's be quite honest. So as an overview, the Estonians' digital ID is built on a public key infrastructure with private keys stored on smart cards, SIMs, and secure apps. It underpins nearly all critical services, banking, healthcare, taxation, even online voting, making it a cornerstone of national infrastructure. Now, crucially, the cybersecurity expert who chose to confide in me to share with you very detailed information as to the significant risks of digital ID for those in the UK chose to remain anonymous and took several steps to keep it that way and to protect their identity, which is absolutely the minimum that I would expect from someone in that position and the very least that you can do as well. There are all sorts of risks that you might face every day whilst browsing the internet, from websites and downloads and those kind of things. Now, you'll know if you've watched my channel for any length of time that I'm very choosy about which partners that I choose to work with on my channel here. But I do work with NordVPN, which provides a level of security for you just casually without you knowing anything about cybersecurity, but it provides you that level of protection online. NordVPN will warn you about malicious websites and malicious downloads before you visit them or download them. It will help to keep you anonymous by giving you an anonymous IP address. It will keep no logs. They've been audited many times by large companies that they keep zero logs about your activity online. For less than the price of the average cup of coffee every month, it is the absolute minimum you should do to protect your identity and your security online. And as they're a partner to my channel here, on top of any deal they're running, you'll get 4 months free on top of that using my link nordvpn.com/BBB, which is on screen and in the description below. Just click the link and you get 4 months free. You get 30 days to change your mind, but once you see how it works, how fast it is, it also eliminates ads and makes browsing that much more seamless. It really is the least you can do to protect yourself. So grab 4 months free and get going. Now, for those of you who don't fully understand how security keys work, which is what this system is based on, now don't worry, you don't need to understand it. I'm not going to explain it in full for you. Not that I fully understand it, but I understand it enough to give you the gist of it. It works by pairing two different keys together. Each key is a very long string of numbers and characters, which is produced by a complex algorithm, which is practically impossible for anybody to guess or to reproduce. Now, if you take two of those and they link together, one of them, the private one, which is held by you or your device, is generated using the public one. Everyone can see the public one, but only your device will have the private one, so nobody can guess it. And without it, you cannot unlock the information. So that is the secure key. Now, the public key infrastructure with private keys that are stored on either smart cards, SIMs, or secure apps. Now, Keir Starmer and others have already hinted that this is going to be an app. Now, the Estonia system uses each of these, and it underpins all of these services, as I mentioned, all the critical services, banking, healthcare, taxation, even online voting, making it this cornerstone of its infrastructure. Now, as secure and convenient as that sounds, which is how it will be sold to you, we must then look at the core vulnerabilities and the threat actor scenarios, some of which have already played out. And finally, why it matters to you and why you need to know. This is the truth of this system. I'm just going to dip into another email from another viewer who also works in cybersecurity for this sort of thing, even including FTSE 100 companies and so on within the UK critical national infrastructure sector. And my viewer writes that they have directly experienced and worked to resolve breaches of businesses including FTSE 100 companies, which have had lots of great minds within them, management, and money to throw at these security-based risks. Now, these are large trading companies that very much want to keep these things secure and have still failed. Bearing in mind the guidance points to a whole list of companies. Not that I'm saying any one of those companies is not trustworthy, to avoid any kind of defamation claims here. I'm just saying there is a whole list of third-party companies that this government is saying is going to be involved or likely to be involved in the implementation of digital ID. But this other viewer who wrote in goes on to write that they've experienced a severe lack of competency and knowledge from, quote, most of the people who manage and work in this industry regarding the IT and, most importantly, the security. The viewer writes, we only have to look at all of the examples that are in the news just recently, including London North Eastern Railway, who've had criminals and threat actors compromising their security, and says that a lot of breaches happen due to what they call a 0 day, which is a previously unknown vulnerability which is exploited by threat actors, then sold on the dark web, that is the bit of the internet that you normally never see that's not indexed by search engines, and then used by anyone who has either the money and or the know-how. And these are not things that can be proactively prevented a lot of the time, my viewer writes, and we've had to fall back on how do we mitigate the business impact and disaster as much as possible when it happens. And this is part of what cybersecurity engineers and architects call threat modeling during the design phase of any project or solution. Even more breaches across the world from state-sponsored attacks, including the likes of North Korea, China, utilizing very low-level social engineering attacks which look to manipulate an individual working within the company, allowing them access or to pay them a sum of money, believing that they are someone who they are not. As humans, we will always be the weakest link somewhere who will be exploitable, whether it's by a lack of knowledge or compounding pressure by the threat actor or sheerly just plain ignorance. Now, my initial viewer goes on to set out the core vulnerabilities and the threat actor scenarios here. Firstly, the centralized trust anchor, a single certificate authority underpinning the entire ecosystem, which, if compromised, this trust model will then collapse across all of those services. Secondly, by utilizing cryptographic dependencies, think the 2017 ID card crisis exposing a flaw in the RSA library affecting around 750,000 cards. This showed how a single vendor weakness can cascade into systemic risk. Each of these are well documented online. Carrier-specific weaknesses. Mobile ID, vulnerable to SIM swap fraud, you've probably heard of, which is where hackers hijack a user's phone number and thus clone and manipulate it, and it's vulnerable to this swap fraud. Smart ID, relying on the device integrity, so being free of any malware or phishing, which could otherwise intercept PINs. And ID cards, which includes middleware or reader exploits that can bypass protections. Now, even the most simplest example of this might be where you have a QR code to pay for parking. Somebody puts a sticker over the top of it, you scan the wrong code and send the money to the wrong place. This is how simple these things can be, which can fool you and fool the system and break the security. Something called X-Road dependency. The X-Road data exchange is supposed to be a secure thing, but the X-Road data exchange layer connects all governments and private services. A denial of service or misconfiguration could disrupt nationwide access. User-level exploits. Some of them that I've talked about from my previous viewer, and some that NordVPN will help to protect you against. Phishing attacks, malware attacks. So phishing and malware, it could ask you for information about yourself and then use that against you. Malware, it could be software that is designed to look genuine, but in fact has nefarious code behind it. Or social engineering, like the example in my other viewer's email, remaining as practical ways to steal PINs and trick users into authorizing fraudulent transactions and fraudulent authorizations, each of which could be used not just to prove one thing, but to gain access to absolutely everything that your would-be digital ID links to. This will include everything about who you are, where you are, who you bank with, what you've said online, your money, your payments, your biometric information, everything. Now, all of those are some of the core vulnerabilities. Firstly, looking at nation-state adversaries could target the certificate authority itself, exploiting cryptographic flaws or infiltrating vendors to undermine the entire system. Now, again, as convenient and as secure as it might sound, if you have every single adult or every single person as young as 13 on this system, this would then, by undermining and exploiting the entire system, obviously then could, in theory, exploit every single person across the entire country. This is how serious this gets. If you tie everybody into the same security system, if you had a scenario where a nation-state adversary targeted the certificate authority and found some kind of exploit or infiltration, the entire system is compromised. Secondly, insiders, employees at telecoms or certificate authorities, or potentially any of these third-party companies that I've just mentioned, could, in theory, manipulate issuance of these keys or revocation processes. Revocation is if you've lost a key or something's gone wrong and you need to revoke that key and create a new one, then that could lock you out of your system and then someone else could get a new key in place. Thus, in theory, insiders, employees at any one of these companies could manipulate this system, and again, it is a threat to the system. Other criminal groups more likely to exploit SIM swaps or phishing or misconfigured service endpoints to target fraud. Now, again, these could be international. They could be companies within the UK, but many of which might be international companies which the authorities would have much difficulty in tracking down, and without setting up some kind of major international firewall, which we don't have in the way that some other countries have, certainly not in the way that China has, the Great Firewall of China, as they call it. This would be very difficult to shut down, and online fraud and digital fraud is already prevalent. Now, putting it all in one place is frankly alarming, which is where my viewer then goes on to write and says why this matters. This system is resilient against everyday attacks, but the centralization makes it brittle. Remember that this is all based on a real-life example with Estonia, which is well documented and proven to have these vulnerabilities and threat actor scenarios. Its centralization makes it brittle. In a single high-end exploit, it could ripple across banking, healthcare, and even democratic processes, voting and voting fraud. Even localized breaches risk undermining public trust and the entire digital state model. And again, these are backed up in published documents. The closing line, my viewer says, is that they believe that these risks highlight the importance of ongoing crypto agility, independent audits, and layered defenses to ensure resilience against both state-level and other criminal threats, and poses the following questions. Why did our UK Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, go to India? And why does he have such good ties with China? Does it possibly have to do with the digital ID in how these countries have implemented it? They say, this is me talking now, they say that India's adopted it voluntarily, but it is hardly voluntary if they say you have to get this to access your money. Just like the rhetoric from Keir Starmer not long ago when he stood pretty much like a dictator and said,
"You will not be able to work in the United Kingdom if you do not have digital ID."
Now, it is hardly a voluntary system if they say you cannot work without getting one of these IDs. That is hardly voluntary. It makes it mandatory, and they won't need a punishment to throw at you if you don't have one, if you simply can't exist and you can't access your money. So they're valid questions. Why he visited India and why the close links with China? Because obviously China has implemented this across the board. and they have street level Face ID, and they will know where everyone is all the time, and they are very proud of it. And as I've mentioned before, it works well for them, but I think it is a very, very different system and setup than we have in the UK. Now, I have to really reach back to other situations we've been talking about, such as non-crime hate incidents, police turning up because you've posted something online that somebody found offensive, and all of these kind of things. At what point do all of these get tied into your personal ID? I even saw something on X today, which if I find a picture of it, I'll put it on screen. They were talking about a sandwich having on it an indication of this is, I think it was 8% or whatever of your daily carbon allowance for food consumption. It's not a far stretch to say that these things might be implemented and then tied against your profile. And then before you know it, they are going to tell you how far you can travel, how much you can eat, maybe even what you're allowed to spend, or any kinds of limits on your personal freedom. They'll say that they won't do that, but the system would allow them to do that, because if it's all tied into one thing, you are all tied to their rules. And on top of that, you have the risks, vulnerabilities from threat actors across the globe, and it's all tied into one system. And as I mentioned, there are documented risks and breaches, even with Estonia's eID system, which is being used as the gold standard here. When issued, there were fundamental failures, and 120,000 faulty ID cards were found to have programming errors, allowing the cards to be used by whomever was physically holding it without the need of knowing the respective PIN. Others further down here, it says, in addition to the other ones mentioned above, in this case, the hacker was able to obtain 280,000 personal ID photos following an attack on a database of credentials held by the Estonian Information System Authority. And so this is why I do this video. This is why I ask you to like it, to subscribe to the channel, to comment on it, to share it, to ensure that enough people see this video, because if we are going to be railroaded into this thing, everybody needs to know and understand the risks. And I would say be given a free choice about it, which at the moment, that doesn't sound like we are. And I think we should be. At the very least, I think there should be a referendum on it. If there's something that affects the entire country, every single person, we should be voting on it, because I don't think people voted for this. The last time I did a poll, it was a whopping 97% of hundreds of thousands of people said no, they don't want it and they won't comply with it. Let me know what you think. Thank you for watching and staying with me, and I'll see you next time.